So we're going to go over these three thermal hubs right now. I'm going to show you why a habitat security type is a vital component when you're trying to pick and choose which thermal hub to hunt. And I'm about to break it down for you right now. So I've been doing several videos, and they've had to do with breaking down these hubs. And had a bunch of questions about them, about how I'm differentiating a thermal hub, what makes one kind of separate from others, if they're kind of similar in topography and things like that. And so I'm going to show you the one I'm talking about, the one I've had the most amount of use from as far as mature bucks. This one here's had two big mature bucks that are up over 4.5 years old, pushing that 6.5, 7.5-year-old range. They're using this particular hub during daytime a lot. And so I'm going to break down exactly why this hub, as opposed to the one that's just over the ridge here, got a big ridge system running through here and got a bunch of different hubs off of it. And this one here is the one they picked to kind of use the most. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the other ones. Got two more that are joining these that are east facing, so it doesn't really have anything to do with direction. It's got more to do with the habitat in the area. So I'm going to show you what these look like, kind of give you an idea that all of them are not the same, so you got to kind of pick and choose. And back in this hub, I'll break down getting into it, where to set up, how things are working. As you can see, this hub, this is the kind you're looking for. It's thick, it's viney, it's got a lot of underbrush. It's not a wide, clean, flat. It's got, pretty flat on the bottom, but it's got a lot of cover. A lot of these hubs, the drainage part, the fallout part, the wider ones won't get traveled much with bucks. They have a crossing point, but they don't walk down these U-shaped hubs. They just cross them, okay? So you don't really have to worry about busting up your access by coming up through the bottom. You can come through the bottom and not worry about messing anything up. So in these kind of situations, you want to go from the bottom up. You want to start out at a lower elevation and work your way up the drainage, and only getting to the point where you can shoot to where you believe, or you have information, or you've scouted to where that buck is crossing at, and you just want to get within range of that. You don't want to push any further up into the drainage, because you can get into an area where your scent could carry up. If you're there a little bit earlier than you need to be, you could actually get into that current where you could catch the swirling wind. But if you stay on that lower end, you'll be in a safe zone. And when that thermal shift hits, then you can move up and get into position and be there to be a little bit ahead of time for that buck that's going to be dipping down into that thermal hub and crossing it and moving along to the opposite side. And a lot of times these bucks will get into these thermal hubs and they'll side hill, not directly in the bottom of the hub, but maybe a third of the way up in elevation. And then at the moment they want to cross down in to get the scent that's dropping through that drainage below that thermal hub, they'll cross and then use the other side of the drainage to gain elevation. And you just want to be at that point where you can shoot to wherever he crosses at on his exit. So you're hunting that exit. It's the exit of the thermal hub, and now he's out of the thermal hub, and he's actually working his way back up into the ridges and back up into higher elevation on the opposing ridge side. As you can see, the sides of these hills still really thick in cover. Had a beetle spot right up here where the beetles have hit. It's opened up a big area, and that's all filled in with thick, just thick growth. Right on the other side of that is wide open hardwoods. There's a big creek right on the other side of this. Once you get on the top and you get over, it's wide open pine hardwood mix, mostly hardwoods. Okay, so that's not acceptable ground for a big buck to cover. He'll cover the periphery of it, but I haven't found any sign of any bucks in that wide open hardwoods. So here we're at the fallout point where the buck's exit trail out of his bed is crossing and going up to a drainage to my left. Okay, it's going that direction. His bed, I don't know if you can see this, his bed is right there, right behind that big pine tree right there. He can't see us right here. It rolls over and down. The scrape is right up there, about 60 yards. I'm right at about 60 yards away from that location. Okay. So right here, picking a stand location be your next key. I'd back away about 30 to 40 yards, whatever you're comfortable with shooting to that location. And you're just trying to slip in right there. I'd pick to the northeast. That way I'd be out of the line of sight of that buck as he's coming down that side hill about to cross that drainage. And like I said, you just want to sneak in, sneak up the tree, maybe one stick high so you're not taking a lot of time and making a lot of noise, and just get high enough that you can see that crossing and not worry about getting up really, really high and taking the chance of making noise or spooking the deer or anything like that. So you just want to slip in real quick, get up the tree, get to where you can shoot to that point, and it's just a waiting game at that point in time. So what you're looking for is areas, these thermal hubs, you don't want to have a real pretty forest floor. Like, you don't want it to be open to where you can walk through it and not be stepping over vines and saplings and things like that. You want it kind of clogged with that stuff. So when you're looking through these kind of thermal hubs, this is kind of what you want to see. You don't want to be able to see, when you're looking up it, you don't want to be able to see 60, 70, 80 yards. When you get down to their level, down to the buck's level, it looks completely different than eye level for a human. So while we perceive it as maybe semi-open, a buck perceives it from this level, or a deer does. So it looks much different from here. So I recommend when you walk into these thermal hubs, get down on their level when you're walking in there and pay attention to how they're seeing it, because they're seeing it from a different perspective than you are. When I stand up, now I've got a different view of this area. It looks a lot more open, but from his perspective, it doesn't. It looks very closed in, very thick with cover. And when you're walking through it, it's the same issue. If you're walking from here and looking through it, it's very closed off. But yet I'll come up here and I can see through it. So a lot of times when we're walking through these areas and looking through them, it may look very open to us, but it may not be to the deer. Here we've got a honeysuckle mixed with muscadine, mixed with wild grape, scuppernines. There's a bunch of different vine varieties that are growing in here. You got greenbrier, you got sourwood saplings, you got maple saplings, just everything. You've got May apples that have popped up in here and have lost their blooms, and now they're just growing on the bottom. You got a lot of viney vegetation. You got different types of ferns. A very lush community that's growing in the middle of this thing. So here we have a similar U-shaped drainage. It's almost the exact identical to the one I've been dealing with as far as width at the bottom, the shape. There's really no need to hunt this thermal hub. It offers no cover. If you notice the hillsides above me, they look similar to the terrain in the bottom. Same thing on this side. It's very open. The canopy is mostly hardwood. It has very little openings in it, so there's nothing growing on the floor to provide any cover at all.
So this thermal hub, even though it's used by deer and mature bucks, it's all nighttime. There's no cover in here that would keep the deer safe during the day. So they're simply not using it. It's very lush looking, but it's very open. If you get down to the deer's perspective, and this one has a ditch in it as well. So the deer love ditches in these thermal hubs. But if you get down to the deer's point of view, this one looks much different than the other. So when you're looking on your map scouting, your e-scouting, and you find these this one on the map pops out like oh my God, there's got to be mature bucks using that. It just looks too good. And indeed they are, but they're not using it during daytime.
So thermal hub number 2 basically looks identical to thermal hub number 3. It's very open, very lush looking, but just no cover to provide any security for a buck using it during daytime.
These type of hubs, I mean, they light up with sign, and it's so easy to get trapped and lured in by all that sign in a thermal hub that's just not going to produce. So when you're trying to hunt these thermal hubs, it's the same with any other area that's open like this. The chances are you're not going to be able to get a buck. It lures you in, it suckers you in. It looks wonderful. It has so much sign in it, you think, how could there not be a buck walking through here during the daytime? It's gotta be, you know, it's just gotta be. There's just too much, it's too pretty. But it never produces. And then we waste precious days in areas like that. And I can tell you, having run so many cameras in areas like that the camera data is there when I'm not. So it relays the same anecdotal evidence that I see when I go try to hunt these areas. Is it's just not worth it. So you got to get those thermal hubs that have cover in them, that have a specific habitat type and foliage type, and those will produce.
So looking back, it's clear that number 1 is the only huntable thermal hub that we have out of the 3. They're all 3 very similar in shape. They all have 3 similar terrain features, but number 1 clearly with the inclusion of that thick habitat, that thick foliage, the dense cover, the security cover that's within the hub itself really made a big difference in these 3. 2 and 3 are used by bucks, but it's only nighttime use. The only daytime use that you would probably see in either of those, since they're so open, is if a doe in heat happened to drop down into either one of those thermal hubs, she might pull a mature buck with her. But aside from that, you couldn't count on that, especially in that early season bow hunting when you're trying to get them in close quarters and they're not moving very much. They're moving in these thermal hubs, but they're moving in those thermal hubs that provide really good cover opportunities. So even though 2 and 3 look really good on paper, 1 with the cover type just stood out, and that's the one that I focused on with all of my camera data, and it's the one that's paid off with those daytime images, and it's the only one that really would provide a confident ability for you to hunt out of. So number 1's a clear winner here, and we're going to move on to the next thing.